Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void, mostly about books. I am doing Criminal's Read What You Own challenge, where my husband has picked out 100 books, wrapped them up, given them all a number, and then I'm reading them one at a time. I have just finished Black Sun, Depression and Melancholia by Kristeva, and this is a non-fiction book, but more a theory book than sort of this is what other people have figured out, where she tries to do a form of psychoanalytic inquiry into the theme of depression and melancholia. So Julia Kristeva was both a psychoanalytical therapist, but also a literary theorist. So she also worked a lot with Bakhtin and continued to work, for example, with Bakhtin's theory of intertextuality. This is in some way, it's a dense book, but it's also a very easy book to read. If you know, like, this much about psychoanalytical theory, because there are a lot of words that she will introduce, but then assume that you remember what they are about. But that's just the psychoanalytical authors for you. What she talks about when she talks about depression, or one of the things she talks about when she talks about depression, is she puts the idea of depression into the idea that when we humans grow up, in the sense that when we are babies, we are very connected to our mothers and fathers and our sort of primary paternal parents. And then at some point, we need to learn that we are not an extension of our parents. And we need to sort of translate or move the love and desire that we have for our parents onto something else. And I'm using the word desire very specifically. And I think that I've talked a lot to my husband because he uses a lot of psychoanalytical theory in his work. I think some of the problem with psychoanalytical theory is that they're using words very differently than what sort of non-psychoanalytical people use words. At the same time, there's really no other word for it. Yeah. For example, a word like desire. So desire is, simply put, what we are drawn to that gives us joy and meaning. And we have something in regard to desire in what is evoking those feelings for us. And that's where you sort of get the erotic perspective of it. And it's weird to, for example, talk about the bookshelf that I have behind me that goes through the entire room that is filled with so many books that my husband and I have collected throughout time that we display. That's the first thing you see when we come into the room, that our bookshelf is an erotic object. But it is. Because we have sort of placed our books the way we have placed it because we want to be tempted to the desire to read, we both have a view of the world where reading is one of the things that gives us joy. It's the meaning of life, one of them at least. And therefore, using books as a form of erotic play is a way of highlighting that aspect. It's tempting us. And that's the way it's understood, or one of the ways it can be understood within psychoanalytical theory. But if I'm going to go around talking about how erotic I find my bookshelf, it sounds like I want to have sex with my books. Oh. Which I don't. But I want to evoke the same feeling that I get from having sex. It's sort of, that's the thing. Both things are meant to give you desire. The ideas are so good, but the way they're talking about it is so weird. There's a barrier there. But what again, going back to Julia Kristeva and the erotic object and the sort of transference of desire that we need to do from our primary caretakers over to something else, to grow into our own person. When that transference isn't working, that's one of the ways that depression can happen. Because what she talks about, and I don't know if I agree with her with exactly this point. I know that's a huge psychoanalytical aspect of it, but she talks about how when we are doing this transference, the thing that we are transferring to is a way, it's a symbolic transference. So it's not the same, but we are sort of tricking ourselves to thinking that it is the same. But when then we aren't able to actually trick ourselves, either because something happened with the sort of the desire aspect before the transference, or during the transference, or after the transference, where you sort of have a denial of the transference, as she talks about it, that's when depression can sort of manifest itself. And while I do not know if I agree with all of these sort of cogwheels that she explains is a part of this, as someone who has dealt with depression, the idea that depression is simply a lack of desire, lack of connecting with the world around you, and this desire for enjoyment. That's one of the things you look for in someone who is depressed. Have they sort of lost desire to do things that they usually did? It was a new way of looking at depression and trying to understand what is going on when you are depressed. So I liked the imagery. I liked sort of the one, again, I am not trained as a psychoanalytical. I don't know if I'm understanding Julia Kristeva correctly. This is my interpretation of it. And I like the imagery that she points out, that if you do not have a desire for things in life, of course that will lead to a form of depression. I thought that was a very good way of pointing to it, and points to something that my therapist has told me, that the biggest sort of drawback with depression is that the things that you want to do, which is hide under a blanket, is the thing that you should least do. That you should go to that museum or go to that party or go out for a walk along the beach, even if it doesn't at that moment give you joy, because you sort of have to do it to almost trick your brain into knowing that this will actually give you joy. So that you have to do something that usually would have given you desire to almost train your brain to understand that this will give you desire, rather than sitting at home and waiting for your desire to come back. So, moving on to the next book, The Salsa Jar. My note with a number, and the number is 56. So give me a moment and I'll find book 56. 56, small book. Another of our Penguin Modern. This is Samuel Beckett, The End. All these are short stories of him, so not plays. And I will just reading off the blurb. From the master of the absurd, these two stories of unnamed vagrant contending with decay and death combine bleakness with the blackest of humor. What better reading to do after reading about depression and melancholia? So subscribe if you want to know my thoughts about The End by Samuel Beckett, and thank you for listening to me screaming into the void.